Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Majlis and Markets with your host Hassan Jivraj. In this podcast, we aim to bring you thought-provoking conversations with influential leaders in Islamic and global markets. In today's episode, we're heading to East Africa and heading to the country of Tanzania. In recent years, Tanzania's venture capital scene has been flourishing. In just 2022 alone, the East African country reached a significant milestone, raising $24 million across 6 deals, according to Magnet, a Dubai-based VC data platform. Industries like FinTech, agriculture and e-commerce have been driving this growth, with numerous successful funding runs. In tandem, Tanzania's Islamic finance sector is also progressing, despite the absence of specific regulations. Activities such as sukuk and takaful are now gaining momentum. To help us understand these trends more, we spoke to Salum Awad, CEO of SSC Capital, an investment banking firm in Tanzania. During our conversation, Salum and I spoke about several topics, including the factors behind the rise of venture capital and Islamic finance, as well as Tanzania's trade relations with Islamic countries. Salum Awad, welcome to Majlis and Markets. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Hassan. Thanks for being here.
Salum, you have a very interesting background. I did a bit of research for this episode. And, I came across some of the social media content you put out about Tanzania and about Islamic finance in Tanzania and venture capital in Tanzania and by extension in Africa as well. Could you maybe, before we get into that, could you maybe tell me your background story and what your story is?
Yeah, sure. So my story is not as fascinating. So my name, as I said, is Salum Awad. I was born and raised in Tanzania and went to school in Tanzania. So my background is in finance. I did my education here. Of course, I did part of my additional education abroad in the US, in other parts of the world. So before I dwell into the world of Islamic finance, venture capital, and all these things that I do under SSC Capital, I also worked. I was employed. My first job was for USAID in the State University of New York. And then we are doing a project to support the parliament in Tanzania. And then I worked in a pension fund for about 2 years. And then I started SSC Capital about 14 years ago. And here we are today, alhamdulillah.
Great. And what is it you exactly do? Maybe you could tell our listeners what you do at SSC or what you're doing in other projects?
Yeah, so I would say I'm all around in terms of the things that I do. I work in 5 different spaces. One is I run SSC Capital, which is a boutique investment bank. Currently focuses on corporate advisory, asset and wealth management. We do mergers and acquisitions. We operate in the financial markets, and we do capital raise. So we raise money for companies in Tanzania and across Africa from the likes of private equity, venture capital, DFIs, private credit, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, and all other major sources of capital across the world. And then my other hat that I wear, I also chair the board of the Tanzania Cereals and Other Produce Board, which is the government agency under the Ministry of Agriculture, which is the presidential appointment I received about a year ago. So I oversee that agency as well on my other work. And then I also work in the space of Islamic finance. We just started an Islamic FinTech startup called Shilka, which allows Tanzanians and, of course, later other people from other parts of the world to invest in pre-screened halal investment opportunities in Tanzania and across Africa. But I'm also an author, so I write books. I've written 3 books, alhamdulillah, and 2 of these books are on Amazon as we speak. For those who wanted to explore, they can just type in Salum Awad and then the titles will come out. And lastly, I, of course, work heavily as well in the local community. So I support a lot of local institutions, organizations which are not for profit in terms of designing their strategy, raising funds for these non-profit projects moving forward, supporting the vulnerable. And of course, I've been doing that a lot in the past 5-6 years. So those are things that I do. And of course, I write for, I used to write for local newspapers. I stopped. I currently write for IFN, which is Islamic Finance News. from
Very well
Dubai.
known. Yeah, mashallah. Very, very good stuff. And you seem to be a very busy man doing like lots of different things and helping
Yeah,
the
so these are the things I do.
very good. Saloom, one thing I want to talk to you about, I want to talk to you about many things, but the one thing I want to pick your brains on first is the venture capital ecosystem in Tanzania. I think when you look at the ecosystem or the venture capital ecosystem in Africa, it's fragmented. If I think that's fair to say that there is a lot of activity in some countries and there's not much activity going on in other countries. But with regards to Tanzania, what are your thoughts on the ecosystem or the current state of the ecosystem? And maybe you can give us also a background of the ecosystem over the past couple of years, like what kind of opportunities are there? What kind of challenges are there facing both the entrepreneurs and the investors? And what's being done to like help boost the ecosystem?
Yeah, so this ecosystem in Tanzania is quite nascent, of course, by all measures. And if you look at the past 5, 6 years, I think it was even much, much smaller. Now, of course, for the past 2 to 3 years, I would say, and especially last year, there's been a lot of activities in terms of trying to do a lot of stuff for the ecosystem. So if you want to measure the size of the market, maybe we can look at the size of the deals that happened in Tanzania. In 2022, total venture capital investments, which were done across Africa, were about $5 billion. In Tanzania was about 80 million US dollars. So you would see it's quite small, even in comparison to what is happening across the continent. And last year, I think there was a decline of venture capital deals across the world. And in Africa, in Tanzania as well. And the total deals which were done, venture capital deals in Tanzania last year, were about $25 million only. Unlike what happened across the world, which are about 2.7, somewhere there, $2.7 billion. So you'd see that the market in terms of deals, both by volume and value, is still very small, number one. Number two, in terms of local venture capital activities, we're still pretty much way behind. If you go just to Kenya, our neighbors, and then you would find a lot of venture capital funds that have opened shops, set up offices in Kenya, and investing in Kenya and across the region. In Tanzania, there's been none. There's only one or two private equity firms which are operating here. They exited the market, moved their offices to Kenya. So that's another thing that will tell you that the market still needs a lot of work in terms of development. I think we have done a quite extensive work in the area of supporting startups coming out, either incubating or accelerating them. We so far have more than 70 hubs across the country that supports all these startups that are coming to the market. So in that part, which I call the demand side, I think there's been some work in that area. And of course, there's been a lot of contribution by the donor community, we call development partners, in terms of bridging the funding gap that we see in the market. So now we have a financing instrument in the market called Funguo, which supports startups in Tanzania by providing grants to bridge the gap that has been left out. And of course, lastly, in terms of early stage investing, we started the Angel Network in 2018. It's been a struggle, but we're thankful that there are 2 more angels that have been set up in Tanzania. So I would say we have 2 to 3. One, which is ours, is not very active, and these 2 look to be very active now. So we'd say we have 3 angel networks in Tanzania just to support pretty much pre-seed deals that are happening in Tanzania. In terms of policy, so we are yet to get there, but I think there's a lot of work which is undergoing now. There's a setup of a Tanzania Startup Association, which I think is also a milestone. And they're also working to push the government to set up a startup policy, which we think will address some of the challenges that we see in the market now.
Great. And Saloom, when we get into the specifics, why should people consider Tanzania as a burgeoning or growing hub for venture capital activity? I mean, what's Tanzania? It's a big population. It's in East Africa. It's got a fairly fast-growing economy. Like, what other factors do you think make Tanzania a good place to do venture capital activity?
I would say all the positive factors point towards Tanzania, and they don't play against Tanzania. If you look at one of the things all investors will look at if you want to invest in any country is political stability. And of course, we can boast that as a country. We've been having political stability over the years. We have had smooth transition of elections. since we went into multi-party in the early 90s. So we've never had any issue. Of course, there have been issues here and there, but overall, I think the political climate is quite stable if you are to compare to so many other markets. Number one. Number two, I think for the past 10, 15 years, the GDP growth has been quite stable. Before 2015, the economy was growing on an average of 6% yearly, which is not the case for many markets. And then, of course, we had a little disturb between 2015, let's say, to 2020, 2021. But since then, the economy has never grown below 5%. And we expect this year the economy to grow between 5 to 5.5%. The population is quite extensive if you compare to other markets in East Africa in particular. I think we have the largest population, 60 million plus today, which, of course, will give you a bigger opportunity in terms of consumerism. And then, of course, another thing, if you're looking at the economic activities, Tanzania is quite diversified. We don't really depend on one major sector of the economy. Agriculture, which supports the largest chunk of the GDP, contributes about 26-27% of the GDP. That leaves out a huge part of the economy filled by all other sectors, which all provide quite extensive opportunities. Agriculture itself Tanzania has huge arable land that is, suitable for, growing food to feed the food basket in the region. Tanzania harbors about 6-7 countries in the region that use the Islam port for the international trade. That, of course, provides a lot of business opportunities and potential for generating enough foreign currency, which is one of the major challenges when it comes to international investments, the currency stability. If you're looking at tourism, if you're looking at the healthcare, so all these things, for me, I think they point towards providing huge macro level opportunities for any investor who wants to look beneath that and pick out specific opportunities from each sector.
And speaking on the sectors, which sectors in particular do you think offer the most interesting opportunities for venture capital, both for users and for entrepreneurs, and indeed for like investors? Which sectors do you? Is it FinTech? Is it agriculture? Or is it e-commerce? Or is it like a range?
So I think it's quite disturbing when you see agriculture is not featuring on the top list of the major recipient of investments, not just in Tanzania, but across Africa. Because Tanzania is quite an agricultural economy. As I said earlier, close to 1/3 of the economy is agri. 65% of the industrial goods, raw materials that are used for manufacturing come from the agricultural sector. And then, of course, huge arable land. I think we pretty much have stable policies now. All these will provide a lot of opportunities in the sector. We import food currently. We import edible oil. We import wheat and other food products. If you're importing such products, that tells you there's a lot of opportunities for you to do a lot of local production, and of course use technology to increase productivity, use technology to increase access of credit to farmers, use technology to increase access of inputs to farmers, use technology to increase access with markets to farmers. For me, I always pick agri as the top sector if anyone wants to look into the economy. And then, of course, the financial services / FinTech, because financial inclusion is still a challenge, not just in Tanzania. I think it's about 22% of Tanzanians are formally banked. So we still have a lot of Tanzanians who operate outside the formal banking system. That needs technology, that needs innovations, not just mobile apps. So I think FinTech also provides a lot of opportunities into that area. I think healthcare, we still send a lot of people to other countries for medical care. We still have issues when it comes to diagnosis. We still have issues when it comes to talent and capacity of our local hospitals. All these, I think, can be bridged by putting a lot of investments that in turn can provide interesting opportunities and returns for investors and for users in the market. And for me, of course, I'll also pick logistics and transportation, because having the Tanzanian Dar es Salaam port, that saves all these other landlord countries huge opportunities for transportation and logistics. Whether you want to do logistech, whether you want to do traditional logistics businesses from warehousing, storage, transit goods, and all these things provide massive opportunities for anyone that is looking for investment in Tanzania.
Yeah. With regards to, like, say, for example, the financial services, do you think like these startups or like tech companies can, are they challenging the incumbents, or do you think the incumbents see them as like a good thing for the ecosystem, like for the financial ecosystem as a whole, or do you think like they see them as a potential threat?
Currently, we don't see that. So honestly, I think the incumbents are still quite dominant. So if you take just two banks in Tanzania, so we have about 30 plus commercial banks in Tanzania, and two banks take about 50% of the entire banking industry in terms of assets. And these banks command a lot of stuff in the market. And unfortunately, all these startups that are coming up in the market really don't bring products to challenge the incumbents. They're trying to innovate for opportunities which the incumbents have not really tapped into. Whether it's about personal finance, we see founders and innovators trying to build apps for personal saving, personal investing. We have seen quite interesting investment and opportunity by one of these fintech startups in Tanzania called Nala on remittances. Remittances are huge. Just before last year, total remittances Tanzania, I think, flowed into $1 billion. And then, of course, we have also seen other fintech startups trying to bridge the credit gap between retailers and manufacturers and the financial institutions. So that's where you see most of the activities by fintech startups in the market. Of course, we've also seen some good work in the space of buy now, pay later space, which is usually not a space for by the incumbents. So in terms of the traditional banking, I think the incumbents are still quite dominant. And we also see some sort of potential partnership between the incumbents and the fintechs that are trying to, ride on the infrastructure that these incumbents have.
Very good. And Salum, one thing that's when my reading of Tanzania or my research was that Tanzania does face, like other countries in Africa and indeed across the world, is climate risks. Do you think that tech companies or startups can, help Tanzania, meet its climate commitments or objectives and help mitigate the risks of climate change? Or do you think like?
Yeah. So first of all, I think for sure that Tanzania and Africa, we are not emitting as other countries do. So we are still net generators of carbon sequestration that we can use for carbon trading. So I think the startups and the innovators and the entire business community in Tanzania can ride on that and capitalize on these opportunities which are coming up, especially on carbon trading. If you're looking at the energy space, we still have challenges in the energy. Of course, we have seen the recent launch of the largest hydropower project in Tanzania since independence that will bring in more than 2,000 megawatts of power. That will help to reduce the struggle that we have had when it comes to reliability of power supply into the economy. But of course, the renewable energy provides huge opportunities, and then of course providing that energy access to the final user household in the last mile, that will need technology, and I think technology can be used quite extensively in that space. In agricultural areas where I think we have a huge need for technology when it comes to promoting smart agriculture, I think we all know how much of the carbon footprint that is done by agricultural activities and livestock farming, which I think if we use technologies to reduce such type of footprint and promote sustainable farming, reduce the shocks of climate changes, especially around mitigation, adaptation, all those will provide currently a lot of opportunities for tech startups to come up with solutions and scale them, not just in Tanzania, but across Africa.
Very good. And with regards to challenges, what are your thoughts? Do you think, what are the biggest challenges rather facing, startups in Tanzania? Is it things like scalability, or is it funding, or is it human capital? Like, what would you say are the biggest challenges facing startups?
So whenever we talk of the challenges facing the startup ecosystem in Tanzania, we usually split that into three areas or three pots. So one is the supply side, and then there's the demand side, and then what we call the policy challenges. So on the supply side, this is more on the supply of capital. That's where we also have a lot of challenges. Because unfortunately, if 100% of all the VC investments in Tanzania depend on international investments, what will happen is these international investments won't do much of smaller deals because they won't make any sense for you, Hassan, to fly all the way, whether from US or UK or Dubai, to come to Tanzania to do a deal of $20,000 or $30,000. So the challenge that we have is on the pre-seed and seed funding in Tanzania. And for me, I think this challenge can only be solved by developing our local capital bases, whether it's our early stage VC funds, which are locally and homegrown, incorporated, grow our angel networks that can fill that gap. But that's one of the major gaps that we have on the pre-seed funding. And then, of course, the second major challenge on the supply side is the limited understanding of the local environment. Because if you rely on a VC who flies to Dar and to do deals in Dar, their knowledge is quite limited to what they read on the media, what they read on the social media, what they watch on TV, and what they read on the reports. But they don't really have the local touch and the understanding of the local culture and the opportunities and all that. That, of course, would limit a lot of the decision making when it comes to picking up deals, especially for opportunities which are outside that in other smaller towns, where I think there are also interesting founders who are coming up. On the demand side, I would say one of the biggest challenges is lack of enough investable pipeline coming to the market. So you see all these hubs that we have 70 plus, but they still need a lot of support to build, to accelerate type of businesses which will come to the market investor ready. So an investor who comes to this market will have enough pipeline to pick and choose which companies to invest in. But that pipeline is still limited because what we get from the hubs is still quite not ready. That needs a lot of work for you to put them to the market as investor ready. So that's another area which I think we face a big challenge. And then, of course, we have our challenges in terms of talent and human capital. We still have huge challenges with our local academia in terms of colleges and universities, in terms of people that they produce, and in the type of the skills that the market needs for these startups and founders and all people to build these 21st century businesses. On the policy side, unfortunately, we don't have currently tailor-made, customized policy for startups, because startups are not SMEs, so they need unique types of policy framework that will help them to incubate, to accelerate, to grow and scale. So whether it's about taxes or it's about licensing. So if you come to Tanzania today and you want to license, let's say, a digital lending platform, you most likely have to be licensed just like in any other credit provider by the central bank. So licensing is quite extensive. There's ongoing compliance. It's expensive. For a startup that has just started, then that becomes a mountain climbing challenge. So I think we need to address that, and thank God that that's one of the things which the Startup Association is working on, to bring in the startup policy and probably the Startup Act, which will provide the specific tax and other licensing regime for startups in Tanzania to grow.
Yeah, with I think you mentioned about the ticket sizes, whether it's at seed or pre-seed or even Series A. I think, do you think the problem is, or like, we don't see that many like large international venture capital investors like Sequoia, for example, or even like the regional ones from, say, like the Middle East, like Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia? You're saying that they wouldn't be interested in like the size of the deals or the deal flow in Tanzania at this current point in time?
So there'll be a huge mismatch, because we still need to do that. We need to build companies which will be in that space of the sizes of what PIF would probably be interested in, or the likes of Sequoia to be interested in. I think if you go to the market today in Tanzania, majority of startups that are raising money are between pre-seed to Series A. That's where the majority are. And that's where we need a lot of funding to build these companies to go beyond Series A. So people such as PIF from Saudi can come to this market and find deals of the size that they probably will be interested in to cut checks for. So the ticket size, for me, I think we don't need all these large VC and investment companies to come to Tanzania to do small tickets. We need to build our own VC firms, angel investing, use government funding schemes. We need to leverage on the donor money to build these companies, to invest in these companies between pre-seed to Series A. And then, of course, we can let these companies now grow, and then probably they can now be ready for Series B, C, D, E, which major investors can come in and invest in. But for now, if they come here, probably they'll fly in and fly out. They'll tell you there are not enough deals in the market.
Right. And have there been any potential like exits or any kind of acquisition of any Tanzanian companies, or are they still like quite in a nascent stage?
So in terms of M&A, of course, there have been activities in the market at that space, not necessarily called startup space. We have seen M&A happening at the corporate level, major companies in manufacturing, in telecoms, in financial services, banks acquiring other banks. That, of course, is happening. And of course, for PIF, probably looking at the private equity wing sort of point of view, that's where they can participate in such level of investments, not necessarily this startup VC types of deals, but that type of deals, of course, they've been happening in the market. PE space, Tanzania, I think we have seen double digits in terms of the number of deals that have happened in the past 6-7 years. And for me, I think in that space there are quite decent companies that can be attractive for larger deals. They only just need to be tracked a bit. They just need to understand about private equity. One thing that we have been trying to do in the market to change their mindset, because most of these companies are family owned. But in terms of size, I think they are quite in the space where they can absorb $50 million, $100 million size of investments.
Yeah, and with regards to the financing, how does the financing structure work? Is it like done based like Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, where the investor gives money and then they take an equity in the company, or is it they give like debt, or is it like done through a safe, or is it done through some other kind of financing mechanism?
So majority of pre-seed and seed deals which have happened in the market are pretty much dominated by safe and convertibles, which I think is quite a common case across Africa in many other emerging markets. And then for those which are at growth stage, pretty much attracting Series A, they have gone, of course, to the extent of doing equity. And then so investors will take some equity into those companies. So all those are happening in the market. And what we don't see, of course, is enough exit opportunities and activities in the market. We have seen one acquisition in the space of cotton and cot of startup, where there's one energy company, quite small, was acquired by another British company. I think that was the only main acquisition in the startup space that we have seen in the market. But of course, others probably are happening, but they're not announced. I must declare that. But for the larger businesses at the corporate level, there's been quite a lot of M&A activities in the market, in the mining, financial services, manufacturing, energy. A lot of activities are happening.
Very good. And one thing I wanted to ask you regarding the startups is, are there like many female-led startups, or is it mostly still male-dominated led startups?
So male-dominated startups is still quite a phenomenon in Africa, not just in Tanzania. And if you look at investments in 2023, female-only founders attracted only 7% of all VC funding that was done in Africa. So that tells you whether it's in Africa and Eastern Africa, I don't remember well. But that tells you that the market's still quite dominated by male founders. But there's been a lot of activities, events, acceleration, incubation, support programs to push for female founders, and it's changing now. If you're looking at the startup ecosystem in Tanzania, in the past 5 years, you could easily pick female founders, but now I think it's quite a number of them, and it's growing every day. So I think it's quite an interesting area, in the number of female founders is growing now, unlike 5-6 years ago.
Very good. And how would you compare Tanzania's ecosystem to, say, like your neighbors like Kenya? I know you guys are part of the East Africa community. How would you compare, like, say, Tanzania's VC ecosystem to your neighbors and indeed across the continents?
Wow. I think we must admit that we are quite far behind if we were to compare to the major recipients. Because what we usually do is you look at the venture capital money, where does it go, and why does it go where it goes? And it goes to markets where the ecosystem is quite better than the markets where there's less flow. So if you look at South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, and Kenya, which you take about 80% plus of all the VC deals in Tanzania for the past, let's say, 5 years, they'll tell you that these markets have developed their ecosystem quite much bigger than what we see in Tanzania. So if you look at Kenya, last year, Kenya attracted about $80 million in terms of venture capital investment, which is the highest in Africa. And Tanzania was only 25 million. So that tells you it's not even 5% of what Kenya attracted in the market. If you're looking at the major global corporates, the likes of Microsoft or Google, trying to come to East Africa, they'll set their shops in Kenya. Why? Because they think there's more talent in Kenya than in Tanzania. So that's another challenge when it comes to comparing these ecosystems. So the amount of investment that goes into these markets, the capital attractions to these markets in terms of talent, it looks like our peers have done some decent work in terms of building their local talent. I'm not saying there's no talent in Tanzania, but in comparative terms, probably we still need to do more in that space, whether it's developers, engineers, analysts in such types of verticals. And then, of course, I think the government also plays quite an extensive role. If you look at Kenya, for instance, I think the government is very receptive of the business environment for startups. We saw what the president, visited some of the, major hubs in the US, which is also now happening in Tanzania. Our dear president also visited one of the major, startup ecosystems, I think, in France. So that sends a lot of messages to the market. If there's a political will from the top going down, that, of course, changes everything. The ministers will have to jump on board, and then everyone else will have to jump on board to provide opportunities for startups to start and grow businesses and hence grow the ecosystem. I think we don't have a lot of activities of the academia in the market. Of course, that has started in the past few years. We have seen some of the companies here in Tanzania trying to bring in the academia to come to the market and partner with some of the ecosystem players, which, of course, is still nascent, but probably in the future, we'll see more players come into the market because it's the ecosystem play. When you're looking at the ecosystem, you're looking at six things. You're looking at the finance, you're looking at the talent, you're looking at the market, you're looking at the support system, you're looking at the culture, you're looking at the government in terms of the policies and all that. And then, of course, you're looking at the overall, the talent thing, the human capital that is available in the market. So if you can address these six things in the ecosystem, then you're good to go. And I think we are moving to that direction. Yeah,
very good, very good. Saloom, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is Islamic finance in Tanzania. What are your thoughts on the current state of Islamic finance in Tanzania? And it seems to me like there is some activity going on and there's a lot of promise given the size of Tanzania's Muslim population. I think it's the largest Muslim population in East Africa. So there are a lot of opportunities from what I can see, but there doesn't seem to be that much activity in terms of large scale. Could you maybe give us like a snapshot of what's happening today?
Yeah, so landscape is changing. It's still nascent, but it's changing for the better. If you're looking at the banking sector, currently we have 5 banks that are offering Islamic banking services in Tanzania. So we have one which is fully fledged, and we have 4 other banks which are offering Islamic banking windows. And out of these 4, one actually is one of the 2 largest banks in Tanzania. They have the network across the country. And for me, I think it's a plus because we can leverage on their infrastructure, on the branch network, on the human resources and the capacity that they have, and the marketing budget that they have to push for access of Islamic banking and growth across the country. So in terms of banking, we are heading there. The size is still small. The total assets held by all these 5 banks that are offering Islamic banking is still less than 5% of the total banking assets in general. So we still have a lot of work to do. I think it's quite the same case at the global scale. And then, of course, if you're looking at the insurance space, so finally we have the guidelines for takaful, which is for Islamic insurance, and that started about a year ago. And we have 2 companies that have already launched in the market. They're offering these services. We have registered brokers and agents who are in the market as well. So it's still in the early days, but hopefully, if they're aggressive, we might see the growth moving down the road. In terms of investment in the capital markets, we have seen issuances of sukuks, quite promising. So one of the microfinance companies in Tanzania offering halal, micro lending has issued, I think, 7 private sukuks, raising more than 30 billion Tanzanian shillings. And all of these issuances were successful. None of them was undersubscribed. So that gives you a picture of the appetite of the market in terms of these types of asset classes. And then, of course, we see the government now working on the guidelines for sukuk. So hopefully, once they're out, we might see more products coming into the market. The government in Tanzania and the government in Zanzibar are also working on potentially sovereign sukuks that might be issued in the near future. That will also be a game changer for the market. We are also trying to do our part in terms of providing opportunities in the capital markets by building a FinTech startup that unlocks investments into the capital markets, which are halal. And then, of course, there's a lot of work in terms of education and awareness that is done by a couple of players in terms of changing the mindset and providing these opportunities. As you said, the Muslim population is quite sizable in Tanzania, but the education about Islamic finance is quite very, very low. So we still need to do a lot in terms of education and awareness to increase uptake of all these services that we are trying to provide. There's quite a lot of work in terms of in the recent months in terms of zakat and waqf as social finance instruments. We see a lot of awareness that is happening now. We see new zakat funds being launched into the market. We see a lot of waqf assets being launched and put into the market. So hopefully all these altogether will help to grow the market. We see some of the universities launching new courses to build new human capital when it comes to Islamic finance and Islamic banking. So all these activities are happening in the market. So hopefully, inshallah, in the next 5-10 years, the landscape won't be the same as what we see today.
Inshallah. With regards to the Islamic finance or banking system, is it pari passu compared to the conventional banks? Because in some countries, like say, for example, in the UK, Islamic products, despite the Islamic finance has been has got a long history in the UK. In Tanzania, are the products the same with regards to price? Are they the same, or is it more expensive? Or
so actually, Islamic banks are trying not to price themselves way and above what the conventional banks are offering. So I would say is pretty much the same when it comes to pricing. And of course, some of the products might probably be lower to some extent, but of course is between there, plus or minus in some cases. And even we look at the sukuks which have been issued in the market, they are well priced. They are priced above government securities of the same maturity in terms of the coupons, just to make them more attractive, not just Sharia compliant, because you're a new asset class in the market. You need to be more attractive, not just Sharia compliant. So that is happening. But in the banking industry, I think we still need to do more because we still price our products by using the same benchmarks that the conventional banks are using.
Right. And do you see international Islamic banks coming into Tanzania? I know Dubai Islamic Bank has a presence in Kenya, and I think Al Baraka Bank from Bahrain has some presence in Africa. But do you see the likes of these guys or others from Malaysia, for example, coming into the market in Tanzania and helping develop the system?
Hopefully, I think I can predict more on non-banking institutions coming to the market, especially in the funds management space or takaful. I think it's easier because the markets are still quite small and the competition is quite small. The banking industry is quite very competitive in Tanzania, with more than 30 commercial banks, more than 40 old banks combined. And then if you're a new bank coming into this market and you have five Islam banks that are offering Islamic banking, and they're yet to acquire even 5% of the total banking industry. So for any bank that is coming to this market offering Islamic banking, probably you need to have a very unique strategy. You need to be well capitalized for you to sustain the growth that probably will be long term. So I'm not saying that you cannot, but it's a market that will be tough to build. Unlike if someone has to come into this market and let's say set up a fund management company or a takaful operator or in the zakat or social finance, in general, or in education and training space. I think those areas are still virgin, if you ask me, unlike banking. But hey, you can still provide banking services because only 22% of Tanzanians are formally banked. So even though we have all these banks, they still provide banking services to this very small fraction, not even 1/3 of the population.
Sure. And it seems like Tanzania is doing a lot in Islamic finance when compared to, say, like Kenya. I know Kenya has been trying for a while to try and issue sovereign sukuk. And I think the president, he mentioned recently that he wanted to issue sovereign sukuk, but they've been through a bit of fiscal challenges there with their conventional bonds. And, there's some Islamic banks in Kenya and there's like been some activity. But when you compare, like again, with the venture capital, when you compare Tanzania to Kenya or to Uganda, for example, I think Uganda introduced Islamic banking very recently. How would you compare Tanzania's experience so far with the Islamic finance industry?
No, I think we are doing quite better. Kenya, I think, has only 3 banks that are offering Islamic banking. I think the advantage they have is these banks are fully fledged Islamic banks, unlike Tanzania, where we only have one fully fledged, and the rest of these other banks are just windows. So in terms of growth, I think they are poised to grow much quicker if they are well capitalized. Unlike what we have here. And overall, the financial industry in Kenya is quite more advanced than Tanzania. So I think the financial ecosystem in Kenya provides them with an opportunity to grow much quicker and much larger than what you see in Tanzania. If you were to compare the two, of course, Uganda is still behind and trailing both Tanzania and Kenya. But I think Tanzania stands much way better way to grow the Islamic finance than our peers in the region.
Yeah. And one question I wanted to ask you, with regards to, say, trade relations with Islamic countries, how is Tanzania's relations, say, with the UAE or Saudi with regards to trade? Is there a lot of foreign direct investment or trade happening with OIC countries like Saudi or Malaysia or the UAE?
Yeah, the good thing is East Africa has had long trading relationships with with Middle East. If you remember, Oman moved its capital from Muscat to Zanzibar, I think 1840. So there's been that history for a very long time between, let's say, Zanzibar and Oman, and there's been a lot of trade between those two countries. And again, Tanzania has had good relationship with all these other countries in Middle East, whether it's UAE or Qatar or Kuwait or Saudi. Tanzania imports fuel because we are not an oil producing country. So in this the shortest market where we can go import our oil for our use in the market. So these have been one of our major trading partners when it comes to importing petroleum products to this market. The relationship has been there for a while. Number one. Number two, in terms of importation, UAE has been a good source market for a lot of Tanzanian food products, especially meat and spices, which have been going a lot to UAE. So the relationship has been there, and there's a sizable trading volume and value between these two markets. Of course, China and India remain to be the largest trading partners of Tanzania over time. But UAE has been coming up very strongly in the recent past. You have airlines between these two markets, commuting, more than once a day. There's a time I think Emirates was flying about 3 times between Tanzania and Dubai. And then if you have your cargo planes, that facilitates easy. The flight between Tanzania and Dubai is hardly 6 hours, less than 6 hours. So I think it's the market which is closer. There's a lot of historical ties between these markets, and the opportunities are immense. And the relationship has been there. In terms of the comparison, UAE, I think, is among the top 5 if you're looking at the trading partners and sources of FDIs into the market.
Very good. And Salum, as we bring the podcast to a close shortly, what are your thoughts for the rest of 2024 for Tanzania, its economy, and talking about the venture capital and Islamic finance? Are you optimistic for the rest of this year and for the next few years, or are you cautiously optimistic?
So I'm very optimistic. If I look at the work that we've been doing for the past 10 years, I can easily see that this work will be yielding a lot of results, especially in the Islamic finance space between now to 2030. So it's going to be a lot of developments in the market. I think next year will be more interesting because you have these 2 takaful operators launching now. Probably they'll be forced to be aggressive, otherwise they won't survive in the market. So I think is for me the prospects are quite positive. Overall, the economy were very positive. The president, since she came into power, she's been very instrumental in terms of reforming the business and investment climate. We have seen a lot of FDIs coming into the market, a lot of recovery. Some of the projects which were suspended are now resuming. Some of the markets which we are not there, I think we are moving there, and then probably we're going to see in June where the government will be unveiling its new budget. We hope to see the budget to be more in terms of catalytic to support whatever that is happening now to unveil opportunities in the market. I think you saw our president did a very popular tourism video called Royal Tour, which we hope probably will now start yielding the results, because the results are long term. Probably the results will be coming up, and we hope to see more tourists, because tourism is one of the 2 largest forex earners in Tanzania. So if we do well in tourism space, I think we can have more dollar coming to the market, and then we can stabilize our currency, and then the market will be more stable. And then, of course, if you look at the overall perception of Tanzania as an investment destination, Fitch just did confirm their rating for Tanzania with B+ with a stable outlook. That tells you that there's a lot of positive sentiments for Tanzania as a potential investment destination in the both near and short-term outlook.
Very good. And Salum, how can people reach you? I know you're active on social media, on LinkedIn and maybe Twitter as well. Are you active on other platforms? And how can people get hold of you and read your work?
Yeah, so you can just go to salumawadh.com, SALUMAWADH, which is my name, salumawadh.com. That's my personal website that gives you links to everything that I do and we do as a company. All the links are there. But of course, you can find me on main social media. If you go to Instagram, Salum Awadh. If you go to LinkedIn, Salum Awadh. If you go to Twitter, Salum Awadh. And then you find me there. You can subscribe to see the updates of what's happening in Tanzanian market. And then if you want to do business in Tanzania, then we are happy to welcome you here and do more.
Inshallah. Salum Awadh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Hassan. Thanks for having me.